Dr. Larry Black is a Christian author, motivational speaker, mentor, and counsellor who's with us here just now. How are you doing today?
Oh, it's a great day here in southern Florida, so I'm enjoying myself.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds lovely. Is the weather good?
Oh, yes, it's probably the mid 80s, but we're anticipating some storms coming through. But,
Ooh.
here in Florida, we get storms all the time, so it's no big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say it is about your work that you enjoy most?
Well, I am a VA chaplain, and I get to take care of the veterans that have fought in America's wars or guarded her borders. So what I like about my job is I get to take care of America's heroes.
Absolutely, yeah, because sometimes heroes are forgotten about, aren't they?
Yes, especially when they're no longer young and spry and out in the front. And so sometimes we in America kind of do our veterans like we do our old horses. We put them out to pasture and forget about them.
Absolutely, yeah. And what are your favourite other things to do?
Well, I like to write. That's why I wrote this book. I like to teach. And that's another reason I wrote the book, because I think it's a teaching tool. And I like to get out in nature. And that's one of the reasons I'm here in Florida, because the weather's warm most of the time. And I can get out to the parks, to the beach, go down to Disney if I want to. So it's a lot of things to do here outdoors.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. So tell us about the book then. What's the main idea of it?
Well, the title of the book is Grieving with Hope, A Time to Mourn. And the reason I came up with this title and the idea is I have been doing hospital ministry going on 40 years. And my time in the hospital, I saw there were a lot of death and dying. And that's what happens in a hospital, of course, as well as healing. But I was noticing that there was a contrast between the way some people responded to death and the way other people responded to death. And at the beginning, I didn't understand it. I just noticed it and didn't pay much attention. But over the years, my curiosity got the best of me. And I wanted to find out why that when this family member died, this family responded in a certain way. And then when this family member died, this other family responded in a different way. And as I began to do some research, I found out that what made the difference is those who responded in a positive way had hope, and those who did not respond in a positive way, they didn't have hope. So I said, let me address it further, study more, research it, and that's where the book comes from. Grieving with Hope.
Sometimes it can be hard, though, when you're grieving, to be positive and hopeful, because it's the complete opposite, isn't it, really?
Well, in a sense, yes. But what I found is that we who believe, we do suffer. We have the same pain and numbness and anger that everybody else has. So it's no different. However, what we do have is we have an expectation that's based on the Christian scriptures that we will see our loved ones again. So that allows us to move on through the grieving process into the mourning process and not get stuck. We know that this life is not all there is. Some people think that this is it. Well, we know that this is not all there is, that there is more to life.
So what is the difference then between grieving and mourning?
Grief is those emotions we talked about earlier, the pain, the sadness, the anger, those intense feelings that just kind of paralyzes you when you hear the news that your loved one has died. That's grief. Mourning is how you respond and act to those feelings. In other words, when you have hope, those feelings are just as painful and just as hurting, but your response is different from those who have no hope.
And are there any myths about grieving and mourning that you come across in your work?
Well, yeah, there are some, there's quite a few, but I think some of the I'd say the top three is that some people believe that the goal of grief is closure. But the fact is, the goal of grief is reconciliation. And what I mean by reconciliation, that is, you are able to accept the death of your loved one, and at the same time, hold on to those memories that you and the loved one had, so that you have those two conflicting ideas together with you. So that's the reconciliation that you're able to do. So it's not closure, it's reconciliation. Another myth that is floating around is that if you ignore the pain, it will go away. But pain doesn't go away, and it does not need to be ignored. It needs to be addressed. You have to go through the pain. You can't go around it. You can't go over it or under it. You have to go through. And it is in the going through that the healing takes place. And the third myth that we have, and this is a big one for here in America, is that if you don't cry, because we don't like to cry in America, you're not grieving. And so some people, they don't cry, but they are grieving. So you don't have to cry to be grieving, because you may be angry, you may be fearful, you may be so sad that the tears don't come till later. So to look at somebody that says, well, look at him, his mama just died, he's not even crying, something must be wrong with him. No, everybody grieves differently, and you don't need to cry to grieve. So those are the three I think that stand out to me.
Yeah, it could be argued though that crying is maybe a better way of grieving, because you are getting the emotion out somehow.
That is exactly what I noticed. It is getting it out, but everybody will not do that at the same time. You know, some people may wait a day or two and by themselves because of the culture or whatever, and then they'll cry.
Yeah. And some people say that grief is the price you pay for love. Would you agree with that?
Yes, it is. If you love deeply, you're going to grieve deeply. Yes. Yeah. Very good. Very good point there. I like that.
Yeah. And of course, there's a lot of bad things happening in the world at the moment. Of course, we've got the ongoing war in Ukraine, and of course, the shooting in Sacramento recently. Communities can sort of grieve together in that way, can't they? If it's a community thing, does that make grieving easier or maybe harder because it's a bigger problem?
Grieving is an individual thing, but I think that when events affect a community, then I think it is time for the community to come together. I think they did a beautiful job doing 9/11. If you notice, doing the 9/11, they still have a memorial service every year. So what they did in New York, that whole community rallied around that city and let the city mourn as a community. And because they were able to mourn as a community, they have been able to move forward through it. And we actually celebrate it because of the community coming together.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's those communities that don't come together that find themselves repeating the tragedies and the sadness and the demonstration. I would rather for us to come together as a community to mourn than to demonstrate. I mean, demonstrate's good. You know, we get things accomplished when we demonstrate about something wrong. Somebody got shot, somebody got killed. So we demonstrate. That's positive. I would rather see us come together, not to demonstrate, but to mourn as a community, to bring the community together.
Yeah. And if somebody is grieving, how could we comfort them without maybe feeling awkward or worry about saying the wrong things?
Well, that's a very, very good question, because a lot of us, we're not taught how to comfort someone. But what I have found is that your presence, being with that individual or those individuals, is a very powerful thing. You don't have to say anything. And your presence says, I'm here, I'm with you. And your biggest thing that you can do is to listen. Let them express any feelings of fear, of uncertainty, of anger, you don't have to say nothing. Just listen. And that presence and that listening ear is very comforting to those who are grieving.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, where can we find the book if we're interested in reading it?
Well, I have it on my website at larry.black.com, but I suggest most people can get it easier if they go to amazon.com and pull it up there and get it from there. And then when they go there, they're going to notice there's two books with the same title. One's a workbook. So I have a book and a workbook. And so they can get either one. The workbook is to help them write down some of the things that they may want to write down that is not in the book so much.
Yeah. Well, many thanks for coming on today. It's been great to talk to you.
Well, thanks, Toby. I appreciate this opportunity to share this book with the world, and I'm hoping that it will be a blessing to many people. I know that the ones that have already purchased and utilized the book have responded to me saying, man, this is such a wonderful piece of work. We need to get this in front of the world so that others who are going through these grieving times can get the help that they need. So I appreciate you allowing me to come on and talk about it today.